America's biggest scam, the Federal Reserve's secret inflation machine. At the time of recording this video, Election Day is actually tomorrow in the United States. Regardless of the outcome in this election cycle, there is an elephant in the living room that's being ignored by both parties. Neither political party is likely to address it, much less solve it. The government is not going to protect you from the things that I'm going to talk about today. Your best defense is to be informed, to take the action necessary to protect yourself. There are two major problems facing the United States. One is deficit spending, which is simply living beyond your means, sort of like if you're a household and you're putting all your bills on a credit card. And then the second one is borrowing without limits, just continuing to go deeper and deeper and deeper in debt. And together, I believe these two are a lethal mix. When you search U.S. national debt clock, you're going to see the meter is running really hard. With each passing second, the United States literally goes deeper and deeper and deeper in debt. What's interesting is when I wrote my book just 3 short years ago, every man, woman, and child in the United States owed, back then, on behalf of their country, $85,504 per person. Now, that debt has increased by over $20,000 per person. So 25%. It's increased to $106,000 just per taxpayer. That works out to over $250,000, $272,820 per taxpayer. Prior to 1913, there was no federal income tax, and that was the year that the Federal Reserve System was created. Coincidence? I don't think so. Let me ask you this. How much money, how many of your hard-earned dollars have you paid federal income taxes over your lifetime? Probably a lot. And if you recall, the Revolutionary War started as a tax revolt. Remember the Boston Tea Party? And in fact, our founding fathers prohibited the creation of a central bank. They constitutionally forbid the creation of fiat currency. Thomas Jefferson believed that allowing banks to create currency would only lead to financial ruin. He said in his writings, "A private central bank issuing the public currency is a greater menace to the liberties of the people than a standing army. We must not let our rulers load us with perpetual debt." Inflation is a hidden tax that steals our wealth and the price we are paying for violating the constitutional prohibition our founding fathers fought and died for. It's a secret, persistent tax that we all pay for allowing a private banking cartel to control our debt-based monetary system. So who are the winners and losers in this Ponzi scheme? But first, let's turn to this Federal Reserve System. It's not federal. It has shareholders. No federal agency has shareholders. These shareholders earn a 6% annual dividend according to the Federal Reserve website. So who are the shareholders? They're banks. Only the largest banks. In short, it's a legal private monopoly. Years ago, bankers partnered with politicians to create the central bank structure. Federal Reserve history recounts the meeting at Jekyll Island. In November 1910, 6 men met at the Jekyll Island Club off the coast of Georgia to write a plan to reform the nation's banking system. The meeting and its purpose were closely guarded secrets. Participants did not admit that the meeting occurred until the 1930s. The plan, written on Jekyll Island, laid a foundation for what would eventually be the Federal Reserve System. And it was sold to politicians as a way to protect the public. There is no transparency as their meetings are not public. Fed meeting minutes are edited but not released until 30 days after the meeting occurs. Fed meeting transcripts are only released 5 years after the meeting date. You want information about the Fed's activities? Sorry, you've got to file a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit. The Fed routinely fights these requests to avoid transparency. In over 100 years, there's never been an audit of the Federal Reserve System. Despite not having a single elected official among its ranks, it has morphed the U.S. financial system into a corrupt money laundering enterprise without any congressional oversight. Yet at present, the Fed, short for Federal Reserve, is in complete control of the nation's monetary policy by governing the federal funds. And to accomplish this, the Fed buys and sells U.S. Treasury securities on open market operations. If the Fed lowers the interest rates, plan to do more, buy more Treasury debt. And when they do, the supply of investable debt is reduced. That causes the remaining debt to become more expensive. It lowers yield on those investments. That impacts the banking system's liquidity to achieve the desired result. Quantitative easing is a fancy term for the practice of creating currency out of thin air, adding to the currency or money supply, which debases the existing currency. That's what makes the dollars in your wallet worth less and causes inflation. The Fed manipulates not only the Fed fund rate, but also interest rates across the entire spectrum. Quantitative easing transactions reduce supply, boost prices, and lower yields in the overall markets. The Fed action encourages risky behavior and punishes risk-adverse investors by artificially manipulating the markets. The free market doesn't exist. Our market in the United States, people think it's a capitalistic free market. It is not. That's a lie. Instead, the Fed is picking winners and losers, which has resulted in the largest wealth gap in over a century because the markets have become addicted to the Fed's freewheeling policies. The long-term effect of these policies is not good. In March of 2020, for the first time in history, the Fed purchased corporate debt. This plan went much further than any prior quantitative easing that had taken place, when the Fed only purchased government-backed securities. The unintended consequence translated into an enormous and unnecessary bailout of corporate lenders, underwriters, and bondholders. Unfortunately, all of that currency that was created didn't go where it was intended to go, which was creating and preserving jobs. The Fed required no assurances from large companies that benefited from the funds that they received would be used for that purpose. Congress had considered imposing such restrictions, but they didn't do anything to make sure that the funds went to companies with large workforces or prevent the proceeds from being used for executive compensation and bonuses, shareholder distributions, and buybacks. Those don't benefit anybody but the big shareholders. While the Fed's corporate debt purchase did little to benefit the U.S. economy overall, the unintended consequences and huge cost to taxpayers merely decreased competition and reduced productivity. So what's likely to happen in the future? If you look at the historical supply of U.S. currency, it was pretty stable going all the way up to 2008 until it spiked. That's how we got out of that financial crisis. I do mean currency, not money, because money is a store of value. Currency is paper printed out of thin air and backed solely by the full faith and credit of the United States. Many governments have similar policies, and countries are printing currency out of thin air, and when they do, every dollar or peso or yuan or whatever currency they have that you have becomes less and less valuable. The existing currency supply becomes diluted by the creation of more and more currency. Many historians believe that the Roman Empire fell because this is exactly what they did. And the sad part is, if you tried a scheme like this, we'd end up in prison for a very, very long time. In the next video, I'm going to go over what the goals of the banking cartel were when it was formed back in 2013, the things they discussed on Jekyll Island during that fateful meeting. And we'll go over a little bit more in simplified terms how this Ponzi scheme really works. So until then, dream big and act on it daily. Bye for now.